Listen to me again. Yes. I'm scared of myself. Well, let me just start. Order my steps. I wonder if you listen. It's almost as if we coordinated this today. Order my steps in your word is exactly what I'm talking about. Listen to the lyrics. I just scribbled some as you were singing. Order my steps in your word. While you are working, oh Jesus. Ooh. While you are working, who is you? You're talking to God. While you are working, God, help me be still. My topic today, out of every day and every way, I am getting better and better. That's the arch. But under it and in it, the topic is self-hypnosis. You just heard it in that song. You're really asking God to do for you what he did with Jesus. Jesus came in hypnotized. And God kept giving him suggestions along the way. But Jesus was open and receptive to the word of God that he was hearing. He accepted it, and in that acceptance, that word that was speaking through his mind was transformed into oral suggestion, which is what hypnotism is. But it was self-hypnotism. Jesus could have rejected it. Nobody can hypnotize you without your permission. You have to accept it. And that is our problem. There's no difference in the birth of Jesus and the birth of you, because he sent Jesus, gave that light to us to use as an example. And Jesus was the most open and receptive human being to receive his mission. And then came to teach us how to live by example. Now let me give you some examples of how I know that he was hypnotized. He says, these things I do. Well, you know the rest of that. I don't do them on my own. Now, if you're walking around doing something you don't even know you're doing, you're not doing it on your own, something else is doing it through. Right? And listen to this. The words that you hear me say. What's the rest of that? You're not mine. The words that you hear me speak, I'm just saying what I'm listening to. God is telling me to say them, and I speak them. What is that? You're out of control. Something else is in control of your life, your mind. But he came to teach by example. And so don't be afraid of the word hypnosis. Don't be afraid of the term self-hypnosis. That's what I'm teaching here today. And I'm teaching it in the context that that's what prayer is. Mark 11:24. Whatever things you ask for, when ye pray, believe that you receive it, and you shall have it. Well, let me read it to you, so you won't think I'm making this up. Here's the contract. Mark 11:24. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that you receive it, and you shall have it. Well, that's one translation. The other NIV translation reads this way. Same verse. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it. That means that it's already done. Believe that it's already done, and it will be yours. That's also to say it won't be yours until you believe that you are already well, that you're already in the house, that you already have the job, that you already have the more money, that you already have the divorce. That the child already run away from you. And the Living Bible says the same thing this way. It says, listen to me. You can pray for anything. And if you believe, you have it. Not will have it. You have it. It's yours. Well, now all of that is what happens in prayer. That's what we're talking about. And that's why when you use that affirmation every day in every way, I am getting better and better, it keeps you anchored, centered in the right now. Right now. And it's not a going to happen thing. When it says, I am getting better and better, that has already happened. I'm growing into a clearer and greater awareness of that truth. That's what it's doing. That's how I am getting better and better. God ain't doing no more than what God has already done. But the work that has to be done in me and among me. In other words, you have to walk through this life like Jesus walked. That's the great example. If you don't, then you are walking as the great exception, always dealing with problems. As an example, he was walking like this, under a spell. In your imagination, which is what this is all about, you have to imagine that you're under a spell. Because you are anyway, but it's under the spell of something else. Think about that. Imagine yourself that I'm under your spell. That's what you're saying. Order my steps in your word and all that other stuff that you're saying. But what is a spell? A spell is a series of words that has enchanting powers. If you're under a spell, then what you do is out of your control. Imagine that you can live like Jesus lived, that you are out of control, that you have lost your mind. And God has taken over your mind and controlling your mind. And imagine that everything that you are doing now is you're doing it under a spell. How did I get here? I don't know. How did I meet you? I don't know. Where did this money come from? I don't know. How did I get this job? I don't know. I wasn't even expecting it. I don't know. How is it? You said you can't find it, the lab report. I don't know. I'm just under a spell. I'm hypnotized. I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is that I know. Amen. Something is happening. You to learn to just lose your mind and let it go instead of holding on to a spell. If you're under a spell, then what you do is out of your control. Your thoughts and actions are dictated by the spell. A spell can refer to the words you say. Now, what is an affirmation? An affirmation every day, in every way. I am getting better and better. The act or the instance of affirming, a state of being affirmed. Keep yourself under that spell. That's what the affirmation does every day in every way. I am getting better and better. It keeps you anchored in that state of self-hypnosis so you can walk like Jesus walked. Now, the pass out that you have is for next week. Do you know why? 2 reasons. I can't cover all of this in one message. It wasn't by accident that Dr. Clara called me and said, we need you for this Sunday. Are you available? Because there's a change. And that way, you're already scheduled for the following week. You'll be speaking back to back. And I said, she doesn't even know why that happened. My mind created that because I needed the 2 weeks for this. Because I had already prepared that pass out. So you have to bring that one for next week, because when I got up this morning, the whole message was changed. That I should bring you today. Now, I'm not going to ask Diana. I want to thank Diana for the one who's been preparing these booklets and pass outs for us. I just send it to her and she does it in her home. And gets here early to bring them, to take them to the choir, to pass them out. So we want to acknowledge her sitting right here. So next week we'll have few people who will be here next week who were not here today. And those are the only people we're giving this pass outs to next week. So I see who's here. And I'm going to give them to the people myself. They'll bring yours, and you can see if they'll share theirs, because that's too much work. Now, here's what came through me this morning to me. I remembered this story about Quimby. How did I remember? Because I was under a spell. And the voice said, pull this up. So I went to the Quimby book that I have in my computer. And I remembered this story, so I just put in a keyword, kidney, because I remembered that he had several incurable problems. One of them was when he had a kidney disease. Lucius bookmark, his mesmerist, he sat with him because they had been working together and asked him what the problem was, and Lucius told him that his kidney was hanging on by a thin thread. Asked Lucius, can I be healed? Can you heal me? Lucius put his hand on something and he was well. So let me read you his testimony out of the book, the Quimby manuscripts. Who is Quimby? Phineas Parkhurst Quimby in the 1800s, father of metaphysics, father of New Thought in America. And this little short story here. As I read, listen to order my steps in your word. Some 30 years ago, his story, I was very sick and was considered wasting away with consumption. In that day, consumption was what? Tuberculosis. At that time, I became so low that it was with difficulty that I could walk about. I was all the while under the allopathic practice, and I had taken so much calomel that my system was said to be poison. My symptoms were those of any consumptive, and I had been told that my liver was affected and my kidneys were diseased and that my lungs were nearly consumed. I believed all this from the fact that I had all the symptoms and could not resist the opinions of the physician while having the proof with me. So we want to bring our medical problems to the altar in your mind, and me along with you. Bring all your situations to the altar, because it's not real. No matter what the evidence says, no matter what the symptoms say, no matter what you feel, no matter what you think, it's all an opinion of the evidence. The doctors, the professionals, the this and the that, and the polls, and the credit report. In this state, I was compelled to abandon my business, and losing all hope, I gave up to die. Not that I thought the medical faculty had no wisdom, but that my case was one that could not be cured. Having an acquaintance who cured himself by riding horseback, I thought I would try riding in a carriage, as I was too weak to ride horseback. My horse was contrary, and once, when about 2 miles from home, it stopped at the foot of a long hill and would not start except as I went by its side. So I was obliged to run nearly the whole distance. Having reached the top of the hill, I got into the carriage, and as I was very exhausted, I concluded to sit there the balance of the day if the horse did not start. Now, you can imagine, you see the man, can you in your mind, can you see him sitting in the bottom? I can't move, and he's sitting all day long. Like all sickly and nervous people, I could not remain easy. I could in that place. And seeing a man plowing, waited till he had plowed around 3.5 acres and got within my voice. When I asked him to start my horse, he did so, and at the same time, I was so weak. But excitement took possession of my senses, and I drove the horse as fast as it could go uphill and down, and when I reached home, I was stronger than ever. Here then was a significant fact. This reaction produced by excitement, suggesting that the medical diagnosis was wrong. Quimby began to experiment with mesmerism, but at the same time, he believed in the prevailing medical theories. He believed it then, but he changed later on. There is a reason for this fact in mind. First, we know how far he traveled to the point where he lost all faith in the medical faculty and proposed a new theory of disease on his own. Now, the point is that he learned so much from his mesmeric experiments that he gave them up forever. Now, listen to two. He's in process. His consciousness is evolving. He's growing by experimenting. First, he believed in the medical theories. He was following medical practice. Then when he's had this experience, his mind, see, that's spirit working in his mind. That's the Holy Spirit working in his mind. That's consciousness evolving, you understand? And so later on, he started practicing with the mesmerism or hypnosis, but then he grew out of that, beyond that, to our present practice, where we practice, the way we practice in thought now. We have his own statement to the effect that when he began to investigate mesmerism, he was still an entire believer in the medical field. I reread that over. In the course of his trials and subjects, now this means that he's now working with Lucius Bookmark, at that time called a mesmerist. In the course of his trials with subjects, he met with a young man named Lucius Bookmark, over whom he had the most wonderful influence, meaning he was easy to respond to hypnosis. And when conducting his experiments, all communications of Mr. Quimby with Lucius were mentally given, the subject or the patient replying as if spoken to aloud. What did you hear there? Here he is, imagine this, sitting with an operator, Lucius at his side. Here is a sick person, a person who's dealing with an incurable situation, and he is doing hypnotic suggestions. Lucius is receptive. He's easy to go into the under influence. And what is happening, Lucius is discerning the problem of the patient. But it says mentally. Mentally, he's discerning what the person's problem is. And what is happening is that the patient now is responding to Lucius, but Lucius is not speaking out loud. Mentally. Do you see what I'm saying? Mentally. All right. At that time, people thought that this was a fraud. Mr. Quimby was often called upon to have his patients have Lucius examine the sick person. He would put Lucius in this mesmeric state and prescribe remedies for its cure. Lucius would then tell him what the best prescription would be for this patient. He would then tell the patient what the prescription is. The person would go and be healed. There's something that's going on in here that is the main key here that I'm talking about that we overlook, which causes the failure in prayer. And that is not so much Quimby, not so much Lucius, but the third person. Who is who? The patient. The patient. In this case, don't overlook the most important principal aspect in this story. The patient was receptive. That's where autosuggestion transformed into autosuggestion. Until and unless there is agreement, where the head and the heart agree, where two or more agree, there am I. There is the healing in the midst of them. These descriptions and remedies prescribed were in accord with the medical practice of the day, as Mr. Quimby was not yet enlightened in regard to the mental factors of disease. You'll see where he leaves that method of healing behind, what I just described. Prescribing medicine to the person and the person is healed. Even though it worked, but it worked by suggestion, transformed to autosuggestion in the mind of the person. He leaves that behind to where we are today in New Thought teaching. It evolved through his practice and experience. The discovery on Mr. Quimby's part that mind was the chief consideration marked a turning point in his thought. He saw that it was mind that was working and not the medicine. It's the person's belief. It is done unto you as you believe. After a time, Mr. Quimby became convinced that whenever the subject, who was Lucius at this time, examined the patient, this diagnosis of the case would be identical with, I'm going to reread this so you can hear what comes in the completion of that sentence. After a time, Mr. Quimby became convinced that whenever Lucius examined a patient, his diagnosis of the case would be identical with what either the patient himself or someone present believed. Instead of Lucius really looking into the patient and giving the true condition of the organs, in fact, that he was reading the opinion of someone rather than stating truth. So we leave the doctor's office with an opinion. And the opinion was in your mind before you went to the doctor. And more often than not, that is the belief of somebody else. Okay? And the same thing with finances. Same thing related on and on and on. See? Becoming firmly satisfied that this was the case, and having seen how one mind could influence another, and how much there was that had always been considered as true, but was merely someone's opinions, Mr. Quimby gave up working with Lucius and began the developing of what is now known as mental healing, or curing problems through the mind. While engaged in his mesmeric experiences, Mr. Quimby became more and more convinced that problems was an error of the mind and not a real thing. As the truths of his discovery began to develop and grow in him, just in the same proportion did he begin to lose faith in the efficacy of mesmerism as a remedial agent in the cure of problems. And after a few years, he discarded it altogether. Instead of putting the patient into a mesmeric state, Mr. Quimby would sit by him, and having given him a detailed account of what his problems were, he would simply converse with him and explain the causes of the troubles, and thus change the mind of the person. When asked what was the method of his cure, he would say, "My explanation is the cure." So, when people come to us as trained practitioners in our field in the new way of thinking and practice, we don't give advice. We listen and let the person speak. And then you listen in an undertone and you hear what the person is not saying. And then you give an explanation, but it's not from a printed page. It's not from where you were trained in terms of say this for this case and say this for this case. You say what's coming out of your mouth at that moment as he did. And you don't know what you're going to say. And that's the explanation. And your explanation is the cure. You better stop the things you do. I ain't lying. You know I can't stand it. You're running around. You know better, Daddy. I can't stand it because you put me down. Nina Simone, come on. I put a spell on you. I put a spell on you because you're mine. I love you anyhow. I don't care. If you don't want me, I'm yours. Right now. You hear me? I put a spell on you because you're mine. Now, this is somebody's story in here.
All right.
Listen to the girl. And as we break this down, what we're going to see here is what a spell is and how it is that nobody can put a spell on you unless you're susceptible, unless you're vulnerable, unless you want it. I put a spell on you. But the positive aspect of this is that you want God to put a spell on you. And you want to accept it. And you want to hear that voice. But listen to the twist in this song that is overlooked by the literal brain. Listen to it again. Now, she put a spell on him. But it doesn't look like it because he wasn't there. And it looks like he was running around. And it looks like he didn't care. And it looks like she said, I know you don't care, but I put a spell on you. Now, she got it twisted. And the people, she knew what she was writing. But like many of the other songs that lyricists write, people like to be, they like to rhyme. But the writer has an under message, a message behind that some people hear. Now listen again. You better stop the things you do. I ain't lying. You know I can't stand it, you running around. You know better, Daddy. I can't stand it because you put me down. You put me down, but she got a spell on him. I put a spell on you because you're mine. I love you anyhow. I don't care. If you don't want me, now listen to that. I'm yours right now. You hear me? I put a spell on you because you're mine. But the close is this. She put a spell on herself. She was under the spell. And here she is crazy, hanging on, stalking, buying him a new car, with his rent, got him on her cell plan. She got him under the spell. He don't even have her under the spell. She has put a spell on herself. Now look into your life. First, let's go to the cousins. Because that's where most of our sickness is, with other people's problems. And they under a spell. And you're trying to make some changes. And forget the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't help this fool. The fool is under a spell, a self-imposed spell, and other people are taking advantage of them, and they come to get your stuff to give to them because they're under a spell. So it's in reverse. Now let's go to us, you me. Whatever it is that we're having a situation in, you have put yourself in a spell. And that spell can be broken. Let's say it all together. Every day, in every way, I am getting better and better. Come on. Every day, in every way, I am getting better. You're breaking the spell respect. Come on. Every day, in every respect,
I am getting better and better.
again.
Every day,
In every respect, I am getting better and better. You're breaking the spell. And now what you're doing is that the Holy Spirit within you, ordering your steps in your word, every step you take, something is happening and life is changing. There is a divine conspiracy going on in the heavens of your mind, and things are happening that you don't even know about. As you sleep, stuff is happening in your mind. All the chemicals are there. Every cell in your body, every atom of your being, your blood is being transformed, your cells, everything is happening. The skeletal system is reshaping. Where's that thing at? This is what we're going through next week. It's in the back of your program and what it does. Now this is part 2 next week. Part 2, look at the back of your program, what it does. I'm developing this next week. What does it do? When you're under the spell, this divine intelligence, this nothingness out of which everything forms and expresses through the subconscious mind while you're under this spell. It does the impossible. With God, all things are possible. Can you hold that in your mind as you walk like a zombie, like a robot, knowing that I don't know how, my job is to say what, and God knows how? It heals the so-called incurable. And I just read you that man's testimony. Not only that he had multiple problems. It finds the way. It makes a way out of no way. If you can stay under that spell, that is your imagination working. He says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Vision. I'm not talking to people you're going to. Vision. Now, my vision is to have a big old this and a little. That's not the vision we're talking about. Vision that we talk about is God's eyes seeing through your mind, showing you. You're seeing what God is showing you in your imagination. That's what vision is for us. And so, it regenerates. Cut the leg off of some animals and then the new legs grow back. Regenerates. Well, he'll do it for a snake, but he won't do it for you? Ask Dr. Barbara King in Atlanta, who came here and shared her testimony with us many times, right? Here she is lying in bed with consumption. Because when she was a girl, there was no cure for tuberculosis. And that's what she had. And here she is put in this place. And here they were treating her. She listens to the radio. And the man said, put your hand on the radio. And she got involved in this prayer. Whatsoever things you desire when you pray, she got into the prayer. Into the prayer. Then suddenly, doctors are passing by her room and coming to her, looking at her strangely, wondering. They couldn't understand what the x-rays were showing now. Where they had cut off, whether it's part of the liver or something, and it regrew into its natural state. They didn't tell her. They discussed it among themselves. Then they came to her saying, we want to keep you. She said, oh no, I'm going on. Once she showed it to me, oh no, I'm well. And she didn't even know that she was well. That's and grew one of the largest ministries in Atlanta and in the country. Am I right? Yes. Same thing. It regenerates. It reinvigorates. It restores. It renews while you're under the spell. It revives. But you gotta stay under the spell. That's why you say, every day, in every way, I am getting better and better. Every day, in every respect, I'm walking under the spell of God. Right on my steps in your word. Teach me what to say. Tell me, but I got it. It revokes. It takes no consideration of how. It cancels out. It reverses. In the name of Jesus. Hey! Amen. What a mistake. Yes. And so we leave here not like we came in. We leave here changed. Suggestion now transforming into auto-suggestion. We leave here under your spell. Oh Lord. Under your spell. We leave here following the great example, the great way shower of Jesus. We leave here walking like he walked. Like a robot. Yeah. Going, not knowing. Going through the way God is showing him through God's vision, which transforms into his imagination. And so now in your imagination, let's bring your situation to the altar, right here. Whatever the problem, whatever the concern, whatever the desire of the heart is, leave it here at God's altar. Release the problem, release the concern. Be anxious for nothing. How is not my business. All I know is that as I walk out of these doors, I'm walking out under a spell of self-hypnosis. Placing myself into that mesmeric state. Releasing all of my cares, concerns, and desires of my heart to the subconscious mind, which is law. This law receives the impression of this thought, this desire, and now begins to act upon it. And now I leave here in a cheerful state of mind, a heart filled with excitement, a heart filled with joy, a heart filled with praise. And that which God has already done and then shows it forth in my life every moment, all day, as I sleep in the anchoring affirmation, every day, in every way, every day, in every respect, I am getting better and better. And so